Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm okay. Energy levels are low.
Me too, man.
Waiting for the Sudafed to kick in.
I'm not waiting for that. A little too late to score some from you, I guess.
I've been smurfing. You know what smurfing is?
No, I don't. What is that?
Smurfing is when meth dealers go to all the drugstores in the area and scarf up all the Sudafed so they can make meth.
Are you sick or are you a Sudafed abuser?
I'm a Sudafed addict.
Are you really? You use it as a stimulant?
I use it every day. It helps me breathe.
Really?
Otherwise, I have allergies.
You need help. I may stage an intervention. So I hear you've got a new perch.
That's right. I'm going to the Daily Caller.
So you're coming out of the closet as a conservative now?
No.
You're not?
And they made it clear that they would disagree with me.
Yeah, I saw Tucker Carlson in his kind of official press release quote said, "Even when I disagree with Mickey, as I frequently do."
Well, there you go. He was respecting my integrity.
Yeah, but I wondered how sincere that was. I mean, I thought maybe he's just in on this conspiracy to depict you as a liberal when you're in fact a conservative.
That may be. It's very insidious. I just want to blog what I want to blog and get paid a bit for it. I am dependent on a network of right-wingers for links. Certainly left-wingers don't tend to like to be. So that would tend to bias me in the right direction, in the direction of conservatism, because, they like items that are sniping at Democrats.
When you say right direction, you mean right as in political spectrum?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Yeah.
And, but on the other hand, one tends to react against the people you're surrounded with if you're a personality type like me. So,
yeah.
So
well, then maybe it'll have a beneficial effect.
Who knows? But Tucker's a good guy, and the most important thing is he's sort of a fun person, and his site is fun. It's not grim, so it should have a good effect. I'm sure he's surrounded by a bunch of good people, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I know the headline for this little exchange, Mickey. Recently hired guy says favorable things about new boss.
There you go.
Yeah, we've just drenched in credibility are the things you've just said about your new boss.
But later, maybe you can give me an opportunity to say bad things about my old boss, although I'm not going to say them until the check.
Well, I had inferred from this new gig that Tina Brown didn't even return your email, but maybe I'm wrong. How did that relationship work out?
I don't think I sent an email. Tina Brown, they didn't want my blog when I shopped it around before, and it was clear they didn't want it now. And
so the Daily Beast had passed the first time around before it took over Newsweek?
For some reason, they don't want a lot of blogs about comprehensive immigration reform.
That kind of tells you to get the resume out.
It's not.
And what do you think? What deficiency in her perspective do you think accounts for her failure to appreciate your value?
I think it's a good question. I think we should talk about this later when we talk about other topics. But it seems to me she's addicted to a high buzz, high profile, high advertising rate universe.
Wow, what a radical view for the proprietor of a website to have.
Well, no, because Ariana's addicted to a volume, low cost, not big name writer universe, and she's doing really well with it.
Well, should we go ahead and talk about this story that AOL is acquiring the Huffington Post?
Sure, why not?
What the heck? Let's go crazy.
So, anyway, AOL, which is like a nightmare and desperate. My last blog item for Newsweek probably is keys off the release of AOL's The AOL Way, which is like their document of how they mindlessly generate content depending on, what are the high demand topics, meaning what the search engines show or being...
Well, do they own they don't own one of the famous content mills, do they? I mean, like Demand Media is one, right?
Right, but the other, apparently another one is Seed, which is their mill. And it's you got to read this memo. It's like unbelievable. It's like they have the Blogsmith demand something tool, which I think tells you if you're about to blog something, whether there's demand for it on search engines, and they want every item assessed for profitability before you write it. And clearly, the whole direction of the whole damn website was in the direction of a massive content mill. If you were an influential voice, I guess you were exempted from these strictures. But so they were failing at this. And Ken Oleta wrote an article in the New Yorker, basically making fun of the CEO Tim Armstrong and saying he was doing all these horrible things, and he was failing at it. So he's desperate. Okay, Ariana is succeeding at it. She's actually turning a profit. So this is Ariana's moment of maximum value to a desperate buyer, and it looks like she's done really, really well.
$300 million. I would take that.
As the Daily Beast pointed out in a very good article, it was cash, mostly cash. 300
was cash, and then there was like 25 in stock or something.
15 in stock. So that's a heavy cash deal. So her investors and they've got their money. They're a success in capitalism terms, whatever happens to the website. Mm-hmm. She's also got this big job now in charge of all of AOL's media offerings. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a great deal for her, and I think she picked the exact right moment when she looked like she was the only successful web property. I worry that the Daily Beast, on the other hand, has basically Tina is a great judge of talent, mm-hmm. Except in my case, of course. Mm. But she's hired the best writers around and loaded them aboard the Titanic. If you look at her website, at her web stats, they're just not that impressive. They're going up, but very, very slowly. And if her stats go like this, and Ariana's stats go like this.
Well, but there's different models, and I will say that the Beast is, I think, kind of thought of as hot, right? And for advertising, that really matters in terms of landing high-value ads.
The Beast, they've made a big effort to land high-value ads, and they've landed them, some of them. I don't think they've landed enough to make money. And now she's taken on Newsweek, which is a formidable proposition to make a Newsweekly work. Mm-hmm. That might help. I think she helps a lot more with their advertising than with the Daily Beast advertising, mm-hmm. because the print ad world still respects her greatly, and she'll generate buzz, and she'll at least get initial rounds of ads. So it was a smart move for her to make, but she is addicted to the paying good writers a lot of money and expecting to get very, very high ad rates in response. And I just don't think that world exists anymore. Do you?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is reason to believe that ad rates could go up as the ads you're served more and more closely tailored to your search, browsing, and so on history, which they're not all that closely tailored to now. There's a lot of information that could be used, that could be brought to bear on their ads.
Right, we talked about this last time. I think the salvation will be when people see that Bob Wright's website attracts really smart people.
No, that's not the salvation. That's not the salvation at all. The salvation will be when advertisers are totally indifferent to where the content is appearing because they know so much about the individual they're serving the ad to.
No, I think your theory gets an extra boost from the Hertzstein principle, which is that you will have smart readers, and smart readers will tend to be rich readers, which is the Hertzstein principle. And
sure,
advertisers will want to advertise to those rich readers of Bob Wright's website. Yeah. And so even if Bob Wright's website only has 15,000 hits a day, there'll be 15,000 rich hits, and they'll get good ads.
Maybe, but what I'm saying is that as they bring this information to bear on the ads you're served, in theory, the ads serve to everyone, rich and poor alike. And by the way, poor people actually do some consuming, but the ads served to rich and poor alike will go up. And what I'm suggesting is that maybe, although things may look precarious for AOL right now, because it's pursuing a content model, unlike various other companies. It may be that becomes about twice as valuable within a couple of years, and that the Huffington Post becomes way more valuable. That's possible.
It's possible. It's clear that this guy doesn't. I mean, they claim to care about editorial quality. It's all about various management metrics. The mere fact that they spent all this time at AOL putting together this handbook of mindless management crap that's designed to sort of like turn themselves into this big sort of content machine speaks badly of them. Okay? I don't think Ariana would waste her time on that crap.
But in buying the Huffington Post, they're moving to a slightly different model. That's not a content mill. I mean...
Right. I think
the genius of the Huffington Post is that almost everyone providing content is doing it for free.
Right.
And then once you've built it up as a platform, it's a valuable, you know, the incentive to provide it for free only grows.
Although the New York Times smartly pointed out the question is whether AOL will ruin Huffington Post.
Well, she's in charge of it, so I don't think so. She's running it. I mean, you know, I think in a way, I mean, I have a theory about part of the Huffington Post value. You know, I was in the Midwest not long ago giving a talk, and I met this, you know, very smart guy, but I had never, you know, heard of him. He's not somebody you would have heard of. He's like a local guy in Nebraska, and he's got like a local web-based audio thing or something, and he's got a blog on the Huffington Post. And I doubt it very often gets front page, play, but once I gave him my email address, I learned that every Huffington Post blog item he writes gets emailed out to a list of who knows how many people. And I now think that there are maybe people all over the world who are relatively obscure. You rarely see them on the homepage, but they're getting their friends and family and 500 other people to read every post, and they're doing it all for free. And maybe that's a considerable part of the traffic, in which case I would say that the Huffington Post comes as close to being a neutral platform like YouTube, you know, as you could become, and yet still be, you know, I guess the term is curated or edited or whatever. In other words, exercising some discretion on who can post, and yet it has some of the properties of a YouTube where you just build the platform and there's a ton of people putting stuff up for free.
Right. No, I think that's completely right. I guess now that she's running AOL, she has to at least say, and she did in the story, that she's more politically neutral. And of course, the truth is she was never as left as her left-wing admirers fantasized her to be.
You mean she personally or the Post?
If you talk to her, if you grill her, she's a capitalist. She believes in markets. She's not a socialist, so she's...
Yeah, but I think on foreign policy, which is a little more important to me, she's right-minded by my lights.
That's probably true, but that's not going to serve her ill in terms of turning it into a global presence.
Right. I think.
No, I think you're right. I mean, this Huffington Post was sort of turned out to be brilliant in all sorts of ways. It was also brilliant in that there's now no unpublished article, and people, in fact, would rather publish in the Huffington Post for free than in a lot of places where they get paid money because they get more attention on the Huffington Post.
Even if they don't get attention, just to say I have a blog on the Huffington Post is better than saying I have a video on YouTube. Anybody can have a video on YouTube. You know.
Good point. Anyway,
So you're cautiously optimistic about Ariana and AOL. I actually am, partly because of the aforementioned potential increase in ad rates, and partly because I think it sounds like AOL is moving in the right direction. The Huffington Post is a better model than they've had.
I'm not optimistic about the future just because I think AOL was so screwed up under this guy Armstrong. I don't see how we can possibly right the ship. I think basically Ariana has cashed out, and then everything else, if she turns it into a success, that's gravy. For her. But
I don't think she's cashed. I don't think she's the type to cash out. I think whatever she's attached to, she wants to succeed.
Of course, but she has succeeded. She has $100 million of money.
Nah. Successful, ambitious people never call it a day, Mickey.
She's not going to call it a day. She can go and do something else. She's a, smart, charming person. The fact that she has this huge success under her belt won't hurt her.
We'll see.
I just don't think this guy Armstrong seems like a much more questionable character. That's the point.
I don't know.
But
good name.
He claims to be getting $9 CPM in this memo, which we will link to. Which I think is pretty good.
That sounds kind of plausible. Yeah.
That's pretty good. So maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a future for blogging heads.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe you should become a channel on Huffington Post.
Maybe. We should become a channel everywhere.
Anyway, I thought I had all sorts of interesting things to say about him, but I forget what they were.
I thought you said some interesting things.
Okay.
I forget what they were, too. But
it was about how your business model depends on the Herrnstein principle.
A reference to Richard Herrnstein.
Who argued that smarter people will tend to be richer.
Well, not just that, but that by virtue of that fact, over time, actual genes for smartness will become concentrated at the upper income level.
Right, but in order for that...
it's known that there's a correlation between IQ and income. That's known. That was not what was distinctive about Herrnstein.
Right, although he would probably argue that the correlation was more solid than other people.
Well, more firmly rooted in a genetic, substrata.
Right. Anyway,
But enough about him.
Yes.
So, should we talk Egypt?
Let's talk Egypt.
Let's talk a little
I
Egypt.
assume you have strong views.
Yeah, I fear the revolution has failed, and I think the Obama administration may be somewhat complicit.
Complicit or to blame? And they didn't have all that much power to change events anyway, did they?
We'll see how it plays out, but I think they have leverage. I think they chickened out. I think they decided, first of all, removing Mubarak, I think what they were flirting with was proving difficult, but at the same time, I think they were scared about what rapid change can bring. For whatever reason, so far it seems as if they're not fully using the leverage they have, which is the fact that they bankroll the Egyptian military, and the Egyptian military is the power broker right now. They could get a lot of stuff. Maybe not Mubarak to step down tomorrow, but there's a lot of stuff short of that they could get, and that the Egyptian government is not giving.
Aren't they right to be worried, and why would they get, even if they did that, it seems like they're not going to get any credit on the street for things that they do behind the scenes to get Mubarak
it will become
out.
known. To look at the others...
And they also show that they're an unreliable ally to all our other dictator allies around the world.
All our other dictator allies have a half-life of about, 3 months to 3 years anyway.
Saudis are going to last.
And that's the biggest argument, is that history is clearly not on the side of authoritarian government. Let's get on the right side of history.
But this idea that we could support Mubarak for 30 years and then all of a sudden ditch him and people will give us credit for being on the right side of history because for 15 minutes we were on their side, I think it's insane.
Reagan did that. Reagan did that with Marcos. He ditched him in a second. Happens all the time.
But Marcos, there's not a global Filipinist movement that we would want to get to the head of. It was just one country,
Wait. Sketch that analogy out. What are you saying?
I think the Filipinos were basically pro-American to start with anyway.
Well, I think the Egyptians could be if we'd quit backing their dictators. But what is the analogy you're making about a global Filipinism? What are you saying?
There's a global Islamist movement.
So?
That we want to head off at the pass.
I'm not sure I accept that the way you're thinking of it, but how do we head it off?
Well, according to you, I assume we were heading it off by being on the right side of history and supporting democracy.
I do think in the long run that's heading it off. Correct.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
I thought you were saying that to back Mubarak. A lot of people who fear global Islamism are saying that's why we have to back Mubarak, you realize.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that we're in a bad situation and it's not like if we get rid of Mubarak, maybe a few people in the elite will know that we did the job, but our propaganda machine is so pathetic in that part of the world that we're never going to get credit on the street for overthrowing Mubarak.
No,
so I don't quite see why the wisest course isn't just to exert power behind the scenes, but not really push him. And then if he falls, he falls. Then we can.
No, I think
we can celebrate and.
No, it's not that iffy. There are concrete things we could definitely have if we wanted. Listen, the Suleiman guy who was appointed vice president, which I guess somehow makes our foreign policy or makes people in our government feel secure, because after all, he did run the extraordinary rendition program on our behalf and torture people for us. He met with a series of supposed opposition leaders, although they were not representative of the opposition broadly. And then he came away and said, okay, they all agree on the following. Here's the list of concessions. Totally vacuous. It was like, okay, the state of emergency will be ended, and then it's like, as conditions permit. In other words, he's saying nothing. Then he says, like, we will not, suppress journalists, and then there's the word extra legally. Well, if you don't end the state of emergency, then nothing is extra legal, right? But so there's just, the thing is shot through with loopholes. It is totally meaningless. And if we wanted more, if we wanted better, and look, the game's not over yet, maybe we'll get it, we could get it. If we wanted it to say, the elections in September will be supervised by UN or international inspectors, and anyone can participate, we could get it. So far, we haven't gotten it.
You're not worried about the Muslim Brotherhood winning the elections, the way you seem to be upset that Hamas won the election on the West Bank.
I doubt they would win it, but if they would win it, I think we're better off dealing with that fact, if that's the will of the Egyptian people. Most people think they wouldn't win it, but we're better off dealing with it. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood, so far, there's no tremendous cause for concern. Al-Qaeda hates them precisely because they reject violence. In general, inheriting the reins of power exerts a moderating influence.
No, I agree. You want to let these forces work themselves out. It's just the question is what damage do they do in the interim?
You almost just have to find out, because this situation is not sustainable.
One thing that's a couple points. One thing that seems to be clear is that this fear that Egypt and Iran will team up to perform this giant Islamic Anschluss seems crazy, because isn't there still the Sunni-Shiite split? I mean, isn't Egypt...
Well, I would say two things. I mean, I would say, first of all, let me back up and say all of this in the Arab world, the increasing significance of actual Arab opinion, because of its increasing influence on the actual government of Arab states, tells us that we've got to get the Israel problem solved, okay? We've got to take care of the Palestinian problem and remove that as a source of grievance. Because that is the reason that Ahmadinejad, what he's playing on in the Arab street is anti-Israel sentiment, and that gets its intensity from the Palestinian occupation.
Your answer, you're saying what you want to say. Iran will want the bomb even if the Israel problem is resolved.
Well, wait, we're not talking about the bomb yet. You were asking about the solidarity between Arabs on the street and the Iranian regime. And I'm saying
no, I wasn't
that
asking
solidarity,
about that. I was
such
not
as it
asking
is.
about that. I was saying Dick Morris and various other people who aren't experts in the region talked about how terrible it would be if the Islamic Brotherhood took over in Egypt, because then they would ally with Iran. And I think they're unlikely to ally with Iran. They will much more likely to be scared of Iran.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't just that there's tension between Sunnis and Shiites. There's also a different structure of authority. Shia Islam is much more kind of centralized, so that for an Ayatollah to wind up running the country kind of makes more sense. As I understand it, I'm not an expert, but there's less in the way of centralized authority in Sunni Islam.
Yeah. The other thing is, I'm sorry, I sound like a jerk saying this. Until that one big demonstration last week, I was just not impressed with the size of any of the demonstrations. It didn't look to me like a revolution. And the media sort of went gung-ho, and all the anchors went to Cairo, so, Mubarak has to go. And that always seemed wildly inflated.
Yeah, but Mickey...
And so you're a little jumping the gun and assuming that this is the opportunity to get rid of Mubarak. I'm not sure this is a big enough jolt to get rid of Mubarak.
Well, first of all, quality as well as quantity matters. The intensity of the uprising matters. And when in a police state with a ferocious police force, the people burn the police stations down to the ground, that tells you something. They're really pissed off. And that matters.
But you can also have police states where every few years a police station gets burned down to the ground and then they reassert authority and go carry on.
Well, this is going to become one of them, I'm afraid. And Obama has the leeway to at least somewhat change that situation. And it looks like, for whatever reason, he's chickened out. Right now,
at some point, he put the Army's aid under review. Supposedly, that was pushing that lever.
Yeah, right. But look, it's a big, powerful lever he's got there. And if the list of concessions doesn't get considerably more substantial than it was last time I checked this morning, we'll know that he deserted the Egyptian opposition movement.
Is it such a big, powerful lever? I mean, they have our rate now. Can't they live off the fat of the land for a while?
Well, they get regular income, whatever, $1 billion a year or more from us. They're addicted to us. I mean,
can't they go to the Russians and say, why don't you give us $1 billion, or the Chinese? It's
I
not
don't
like
know
we're the
that the
only people
Russians,
that can
have the
subsidize them.
inclination, especially. What's in it for the Russians, Egypt only matters because to us, mainly, because of the Israeli peace deal that Carter brokered.
Well, there's the Suez Canal, and China is a big mercantile power. You think they wouldn't mind being
the Suez
friendly
Canal, is open to everyone as it stands. Why would Russia want to pay $1 billion a year for something it's got already?
I'm talking to China because it might lose it.
You're talking to who?
What about China? China is in the process of setting up friendly ports all over the world.
The Suez Canal, why? The answer is always the same. Why pay $1 billion a year for what you've already got? Anyway, it's very depressing to me.
I didn't expect you to take this hard line. At least it's clear.
Well, it's not especially like human rights based. That's not the part of the liberal foreign policy school I represent. I am what I call a progressive realist, but not an old fashioned realist who always favors short-term stability over everything, but a realist who recognizes the direction in which things are moving and says, get yourself on the right side of history, you're going to pay the price.
This has generally been the moment where, as Leon Wieseltier said, we realize realism isn't that realistic.
Meaning what?
These so-called stable autocratic regimes we've been supporting in the name of realism aren't all that stable, and they're going to crumble one day, so
not only
that, it's not very realistic.
Not only that, but our support for them is engendering ill will among the people who are going to be in power. That's why it's stupid for Obama to keep playing this game.
But you're saying he has to, but in order to win them over, we have to play it in private and in public.
No, I don't think the public voice matters as much as the private.
I mean, because it's the thing itself that's good for us, democracy, not getting credit for bringing it.
No, I think afterwards you do tell your story. You want the people to know that we helped them along, absolutely, because, to look at the flip side of the coin, I think this is only going to further embitter them toward us. As things are going now, I think they're going to feel betrayed.
What about the argument that every other dictator in the region is going to realize we're a bad ally?
Personally, I think that would be good for us, So, if we are no longer collaborating with the Yemeni government, again, my general feeling is that authoritarianism is in the long run doomed, and we would be doing ourselves a favor by rising in the esteem of the people who are actually going to be running things soon, which is to say the people.
Should we have done the same thing in Iran?
You mean with the Shah or what?
No, with the Greens, to support the Green Revolution.
Well, we didn't have leverage in Iran. Again, I'm not talking about publicly voiced support. I'm talking about private levers. We don't have any leverage with Iran.
I'm sure we have some. But I understand your point.
What, agree to remove the sanctions or something? I don't know. But as Bush himself said, we're all sanctioned out with Iran. I think he said that.
Okay, no, I'm just probing.
But I would also say, let me also say, there's a distinction here. It's totally clear that the last Egyptian election was totally rigged, okay?
Yeah.
In Iran, the situation is murkier, and reasonable people disagree over whether there was substantial rigging, and B, whether Ahmadinejad would have won anyway.
Yeah, I thought the consensus was they rigged it, but they didn't have to. Because they might have.
I actually think that's... There are people who believe... I think the more common belief is they rigged it and they had to.
Okay. I was reflecting the State Department position, as is my want.
Well, maybe you're right.
Well, you have a strong opinion, and foreign policy is not in my bailiwick.
That's why I'm here, Mickey.
Uh,
To help you along. Now, speaking of...
do you think this was a Twitter revolution, by the way? I think Twitter helped, but it's like, everybody talks about how social media is going to change the face of campaigns. Well, I ran for office. It didn't seem to be social media made all that much difference compared to the old-fashioned methods. And the same here, I suspect.
No, I think the technology is very important, and it's one of the reasons that I say that history is on the side of not on the side of the authoritarians. It's not. First of all, it's not a sufficient cause. There has to be the discontent and so on.
No, but like Ann Applebaum said, well, it's only the elite in Egypt that gets Twitter anyway, so it just wasn't that important.
Well, yeah, but they're the ones who led this and organized it, I think. I mean, relatively well-educated. It's a cross-section and it's showing up at these things, but I think the well-educated people were crucial. The problem, by the way, we can get back to Twitter, but the problem is that in a way, the technology is the problem, in the sense that it permits you to have a relatively leaderless revolution, and as a result, the opposition doesn't have any kind of unified spokesperson. And right now is when they need one. If indeed it looks like Mubarak is going to hang on until September, then they need to start negotiating very specific concessions in exchange for ending the demonstrations. But there's nobody to negotiate for, especially the younger demonstrators who reject all these old school. They reject the Muslim Brotherhood. They reject all the older secular opposition leaders. If you don't have a leader, that's a real handicap in the end. So. And that,
good point.
That's an ironic downside of the technology. But yeah, I think the technology is very, very significant, and
you wonder if that's sort of a mindless reaction. If that's sort of also true on the American left. In other words, the netroots haven't thrown up an obvious leader. I guess Marcos Velitsas would be the...
Yeah, I was going to say.
He would be the most obvious, but he's actually not that... he's sort of been sidelined a bit. It's not like the old days when Bobby Kennedy would be the champion or somebody would be the champion. There really isn't a big champion. And I wonder if that hurts you.
Well, I don't know, but I think they need a spokesperson much less than the Egyptian opposition does right
true.
now. I mean,
no, but I just was trying to follow your thought. Sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. I was going to say something else, but I guess I don't know what it was.
So anyway, it's embarrassing for the American anchors to have gone over there and not produced a revolution.
Oh, can I just say that American cable news really is bad? I mean, I've been watching some of it. It's so bad.
Why is it so bad?
Anderson Cooper. I mean, from CNN's point of view, this isn't the Egypt story. It's the Anderson Cooper story.
Well, sure.
I mean, they get a camera to follow him around in the hopes that somebody will rough him up. And then they're like, he was punched 4 times in the face, and they show us the footage. I didn't see anybody lay a glove on him. It was pathetic. Where are the bruises? I mean, seriously. And the melodrama, it's just horrible. Al Jazeera is so much better, and the BBC is so much better.
Huh.
Why can't we have a decent cable news station?
I'm told Fareed's show is very good.
Fareed's show is good, but that's like one Sunday morning show. I mean, the Sunday morning shows in general are more highbrow than the ongoing commentary on the 24-hour news channels. Why can't we have a good news channel?
Good question. Because, I don't know, because they can't they can't uncover the privacy information of all the viewers and sell them to advertisers.
Well, maybe we should solve that problem and become what is now lacking.
By the way, I thought we looked really good dressed up last week. I thought it made the last time. I thought it made what we said seem smarter even though it wasn't.
Oh, is it too late to put on a little...
Well, I would be wearing a coat now, but it'd be too hot here. It's sunny California. But I am dressed more formally.
Well, let's do that next time.
I just think, up a notch from the T-shirt. maybe for me.
I never wear T-shirts, but
Okay,
speaking of Twitter, should we speak of Twitter?
sure.
I mean, partly this gets back to your new job. In fact, I have a question. I mean, I look at the Daily Call. Let's get back to your new job. Can we get back to your new job just briefly?
Sure. It's so exciting.
What? I beg your pardon?
It is so exciting.
Well, it is for the many of us who wish you well. So the Daily Caller, I look at their homepage, and it doesn't look like they have a little, like a place where you click blogs and see all the bloggers, right? Or do they?
I don't know.
Seems to me like, am I right?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't think they have a lot of bloggers.
Did you look at the homepage before you took the job, Mickey?
No. No, I visit the site regularly. It's put up by people who are engaged
Quality
in politics and not solemn about it.
They're quality people, Mickey. They're your new bosses.
There you go.
But it looks like you just get a kind of a steady tiling of news stories, and I guess when you have a blog post, if it's worthy, it will be one of those news stories and get a decent amount of play. But here's my question. Do they get much traffic through their homepage, or are you expected to bring the traffic, whether through Twitter or whatever?
I don't know. My philosophy has been for the last few years, I bring my own traffic. I don't care. This is actually, to me, an interesting point. I don't care if the homepage links to me or not. I'll get my traffic because other bloggers will link to me, and they'll find me without going through the homepage. And this is a point about there's all this talk. There's a very incoherent article in the New York Observer about the end of blogs. That the idea that people just write what they want without any editorial intervention is giving way to the power of scoops and things that are advertised on homepages, and people want you to write these sort of little self-contained essays on whatever the hot topic is, and that's the wave of the future. And I just think any time you're dependent on the homepage for your traffic, that means you're dependent on another person, i.e. an editor. And then your incentive is always to please that editor, which means writing about whatever the hot topic of the day is, so they can link to you and get hits. And that was sort of the dynamic that was shaping up at Slate when I left. And anytime that is the prevailing dynamic. And the virtue of blogs is precisely that you don't depend on anybody else. You write about what you think, and you don't care what some editor thinks will be the most hit topic, and you rely on other bloggers who you've picked a fight with or you agree with to find your stuff interesting and link to you. That's the model I pursue, and is it successful or not? I don't know. It's mildly successful.
The concept of kind of formalized contractual dependence on another human being bothers you, doesn't it?
When the other human being is going to want me to write about Lady Gaga, yes.
So the homepage, I mean, it isn't just that if you're dependent on homepage traffic, it brings compromise. In a lot of cases, that's not going to do you any good. There's a number of sites that kind of do not bad traffic, but almost none of it actually comes through the homepage. It all comes horizontally. So being on the homepage doesn't do you much good anyway, and everybody's bringing their own traffic in one sense or another, either reciprocal linkage with other blogs, search engine hits, or Twitter, or whatever, right?
Right, although Nick Denton claims that the only thing that matters is Facebook. I don't quite understand that.
Well, or Facebook, yeah, social media generally.
In my world, the most important thing that matters is Instapundit, okay? I'm very Instapundit dependent. If Instapundit links to me, I have a good day. If he doesn't link to me, I have a bad day. Twitter
I have a grievance with him. I've got to send him an email, an aggrieved email.
Twitter is about a fifth of Instapundit. I don't see where Facebook does me any good at all. That is not the world that Nick Denton apparently lives in. He says Twitter doesn't matter and it's all Facebook. I don't understand it. Maybe I don't understand Facebook. As far as I can see, all this social media is not nearly as important as everybody thinks it is. In my world, that's true.
But I think it's a growing significance. Manifestly it is, and I guess what I mean is I don't know that there's a reason to expect the growth to stop. I mean, have you seen Flipboard on the iPad?
No.
It's not that great, but what it does is it turns the URLs in your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed into the actual article. So it looks like a newspaper or like a magazine you're flipping through, but instead of just the URLs, it goes ahead and posts the articles.
You don't think everybody's going to realize that Twitter is making them unhappy and they're going to stop using it?
Well, Twitter's a fascinating phenomenon to me.
Facebook.
Oh, Facebook?
Yeah.
No signs of that yet. I don't pay much attention to it. I have recently come to appreciate the virtues of Twitter. I mean, first of all, when there's a breaking story and you want to follow it minute by minute, hour by hour, like Egypt.
Twitter is the fastest.
Yes. Twitter, yeah, by far. If you're following the right people, it is so far ahead of newspaper websites and blogs. And it's, and to some extent, I think, we just passed the threshold, right? I mean, Matt Drudge started a Twitter feed this week.
Right. And I don't quite understand why that's so earth-shaking, but...
Well, it's just a sign that everyone... who wants to kind of remain big time in the, who wants to hang on to the traffic they've got is feeling a need to enter the Twitterverse. And I gotta say, it has a real kind of energy, and I think it's taking a little of the energy out of blogs. I think there are, to some extent, the conversation that happens on Twitter among bloggers is displacing a little of the conversation.
You're not saying anything that other people haven't said 6 months ago, Bob.
Am I saying it better?
You're saying it very succinctly and very, very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Twitter's been stealing energy from blogs for a long time. And in fact, that's one of the problems I have is I was blogging for Newsweek, and it wasn't especially cumbersome, but it was so much easier to just post on Twitter that Newsweek was losing a lot of the posts. And the only solution to that is to make it as easy to blog for a big media organization as it is for Twitter. And that's sort of inherently hard because big media organizations tend to have lawyers and liability, and they want editors to read it. And there's no way that's ever going to be as fast as Twitter. So I don't quite know how to resolve the dilemma. My sort of retro reaction is to stick with blogs. Lone bloggers, they're faster, they don't have to worry about lawyers, they can be just like Twitter, except they can write more than 140 characters.
You mean a freestanding blog is not affiliated with a website?
Right, I mean, there's always the problem of, it's a little complicated, but there's always under conventional sort of pre-internet libel law, people would be insane to let a blogger write anything they wanted without an editorial check, because you could libel somebody, then the home corporation would be on the hook. The Copyright Act, the Decennial Copyright Act, sort of changed that by sort of seeming maybe to give websites immunity if the bloggers were just like people posting on AOL. Nobody really knows how that's going to shake out, but it's just hard for me to believe that even Huffington Post will ever be as fast as Twitter. So
now here's a question.
That means that a lone blogger who could be as fast as Twitter might be able to steal a march. But maybe Drudge's virtue is clearly he's just a lone guy. He just puts up the stuff. So he can be very fast when he wants to be.
But speaking of the speed, here's what's kind of fascinating to me. I don't know what to make of it, if anything, but, yes, Twitter, the reaction time, is greatly accelerated between when an event happens and when you see commentary on it. On Twitter, it's faster than on blogs by and large, right? It's just interesting to me that, and the rate at which new developments get assimilated by the kind of social brain of bloggers, journalists, Twitters, whatever. You see issues getting worked through on Twitter the way you do on the blogosphere, but it's been accelerated on Twitter, and the reaction time is shorter. And it's just interesting to me that what accomplished that was just placing an absolute limit on the length of the message. It's just kind of a interestingly oblique way to achieve an end, and I don't know that was their end to begin with. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. No, I think all that worked. Can I bring up what I think is the biggest lie in journalism? At least the one.
Yeah, but first I have to ask you one crucial thing. I've never tweeted. I have 6 followers, I think most of whom are getting me mixed up with somebody else.
Right.
But I'm thinking it could be that it could make sense to do a little tweeting, because maybe with Twitter, unlike with blogs, you can actually get some exposure without doing it all that frequently. It can be intermittent, and yet you can get a voice. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't think it's true.
Oh.
But
sorry to hear that.
Because
I had a theory,
you
but I
build
won't
up a
bore you.
following, and you build up a following by plugging away at least for a little while.
Yeah, you do have to be strategic about building the following, but the point is, if you have a standalone blog that's not on some big website, then you know, well, never mind. I'm rethinking this.
I think once you have the following, then you can slack off, and if you then tweet something, it will be pushed out to all your followers in a way that a blog would not be.
Although maybe now that with RSS, blogs are the equivalent of Twitter in that respect, so I take it all back. But anyway, yeah, what is the big lie?
Well, this is the one lie that journalists, that no news organization will admit to or expose. Bob, this is a boring time in politics. It's a boring time to be a journalist. Egypt aside, ain't nothing exciting happening. Congress is gridlocked. We're faced with the exciting battle where the Republicans are going to cut spending and the Democrats are going to defend spending. How exciting is that, Bob? His answer is not exciting at all. Not nearly as exciting as the health care debate or the immigration debate or the welfare debate or the Social Security debate, although it's partly the Social Security debate, but it's just not an exciting time to be a journalist. Yet we have all these web properties and newspapers and news organizations determined to constantly generate more and more content as if this was an exciting enough time to justify all that content, and they will never give the lie to say, well, no, this really isn't, it's really not worth tweeting, it's not worth writing 50 articles about, whether Tim Pawlenty will run for president or not. The only place you will hear that is here on Blogging Heads, Bob.
That's what Blogging Heads is for.
This is a very good time if you're into politics. It's a very good time to go off, raise a family, write a play, paint a painting, do something else for a while.
That makes you about as much money as journalism would have made you anyway.
Exactly. Anyway.
But I'm not sure. I mean, they're in some ways it's one of the more intense times. I mean, you still do have some really colorful figures out there,
Like Mitch Daniels and Tim Pawlenty?
No, I was thinking Sarah Palin and Bachman and so on.
Oh, but Sarah Palin, she's what makes it so boring, because she's not going to win, yet everybody's going to write about her because she brings web hits. And how much do you want to know about Sarah Palin? I mean, she's so hot that you now know everything that you want to know about her. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Are you fascinated by Sarah Palin? I'm no longer fascinated by Sarah Palin.
No, but I do think it's a time of interesting ferment in American politics. I mean, I remain a little bit alarmed, or just the movement that Glenn Beck represents. Okay, an appreciable number of people who are essentially crazy. He spins these elaborate, crazy conspiracy theories, and there's these people out there apparently, although his audience, I guess, is not huge, but I guess if you add in his radio audience.
Don't you think Glenn Beck is dying? I mean, the Tea Party is not dying, but the Tea Party is way bigger than Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck goes on O'Reilly these days, and O'Reilly kicks the crap out of him. It's amazing with the Egypt thing. You got to look at that. I mean, Beck had he was incoherent. It was like, we have to worry about the Muslim Brotherhood. Yet he was basically taking every side of the issue, and O'Reilly just destroyed him. And I don't think O'Reilly would destroy him if he was bigger than O'Reilly. I think O'Reilly correctly senses that Beck's audience is smaller and going down. You mean you don't think O'Reilly would choose to destroy him? Right. You think it's a sign that the gods at Fox News have are backing away? O'Reilly's an Irish guy he's a macho guy who would like to destroy all his Fox cohorts. But he wouldn't do it if Beck was so big that he couldn't bully him around. He correctly senses that Beck is now small enough that he can bully him around. I think that's true, and I actually think, although there wasn't any kind of connection between Beck and Loeffner,
I think the Tucson shooting did lower Beck's stock a little further.
And he has to keep coming up with these a crazy theory for every event that other people don't have, and he's becoming a joke.
So wait,
as I said before, my right-wing friends have never liked him. They think he's a phony.
Yeah, he is a. Yeah, I think he is.
So they think Overman is right when he calls him Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes being the fictional character in a movie called A Face in the Crowd, who's also a phony, I think.
Wasn't there a baseball player named Dusty Rhodes? No?
Maybe it's Lonesome Rhodes. It's Lonesome Rhodes, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's better. Well, okay, so if this is so boring now, Mickey, here's a segue.
Yeah.
What past periods would you compare it unfavorably with in that regard? Say Clinton or the Reagan era?
Well, Clinton's second term was pretty boring.
Okay.
And the epic race between Clinton and Dole is the most boring presidential campaign in history.
Okay.
So
this isn't so boring in historical perspective.
No, it's equivalent of that. But the problem is in Clinton in the second Clinton half, we didn't have this giant media apparatus dependent on generating a new item every 10 minutes about something and pretending that it's so significant.
Okay, that's the problem then.
It was still a bit the era of old media where, you read the New York Times every day and you were done with it.
Okay, so it's the coverage to substance.
The livelihoods of all our friends didn't depend on pretending that they were excited by things that they really shouldn't be excited about.
Okay, so you're saying the ratio of media coverage to substance is very high, but it sounds to me that's largely because the amount of media coverage has grown or the intensity of it or something.
And the substance has shrunk now.
Well, maybe, yeah, but it sounds to me it's at least as much the former as the latter.
Right, but it was both. It's as boring a time as the second half of the Clinton era, although not as prosperous, and the pre-Lewinsky,
Yeah, but the truth is, you're just not a foreign, you're just not a globally minded person. This thing in the Middle East is huge. It's huge.
But according to you, it's petering out.
Well, the Egyptian version, I fear, is not going to reach the climax I'd like it to reach, and that will slow the rate of contagion. But the thing in Tunisia, it remains very significant, and I think, I think even though you're not going to get meaningful regime change in Egypt, probably, it looks like right now, you are going to have Arab governments more responsive to the public will because they're scared. They're more scared now.
And here's the point that you don't want to admit, Bob.
Oh, try me.
Iraq. A lot of this has to do with Iraq. People look at Iraq and they see a democracy that, however balky, is sort of working. The people have free speech. They're electing candidates they like, and they say, why can't we have that here? It's at least as important as Twitter.
Mickey, you know what the news from Iraq is in the Arab world? It's like the news from Iraq here, which is every week 50 people get blown up.
They had an election. They elected a prime minister.
Model.
They have factions in parliament. The prime minister stepping down because after 2 terms. Those are things that don't happen in the ordinary Arab autocracy. If you were an Arab living in a dictatorial regime, you would say, "Why can't I have what they have in Iraq?
Why can't I get blown up in my mosque?" Is that what they're saying in the Arab world?
You're now reduced to cheap sensationalism.
Mickey, it's true.
You're focusing on relatively unimportant things, a few people blown up here and there, and ignoring the big picture because the big picture is embarrassing to you because it shows that Bush's war, which I agree was ill-considered and misguided, had some very good effects.
You're exactly wrong, and this is why the question of technology matters. What Tunisia shows, and to some extent Egypt, even if the revolution fails in the end, is that technology is eroding the power of authoritarian government, something I don't think you actually deny. Well, if that's the case, and it's doing so more and more, then forcefully implanting democracy makes less sense than ever, given the huge cost it had for us. But better to just wait for history to take its course. I agree that Iraq would have been one of the last to fall.
Cut off aid to the Egyptian military.
What?
You don't want to wait. You want us to cut off aid to the Egyptian military. So you're willing to take that short
Mickey,
circuit.
that's a little different from going. Mickey. That's a little different from going in, invading a country, and killing hundreds of thousands of people. Would you agree?
We're talking about whether it had an effect, not what the cost was. And Tunisia happened after Twitter, and it happened after Iraq. So why can't you say both were factors?
Mickey, just calm down. Just wait. Can I reply? You acted as if there was some paradox, some contradiction in my favoring or using our leverage with the Egyptian military now, but not favoring a war in Iraq that kills hundreds of thousands of people.
No,
do you understand the difference now? Do you understand why I have a preference for one over the other?
You were saying let's let matters take their course, and I was saying no, you're not willing to let matters take their course. You're willing to do
allow me to state the proposition a little more fully, Mickey. If the cost to American interest and the cost in innocent lives are going to be huge, then it's better to let nature take its course. If, on the other hand, the Egyptian people have, in inspiring fashion, done the work and teed the ball up for us, and all we have to do is put a little pressure on the Egyptian military, then yeah, I think that's an acceptable cost. You get the difference?
I love it when you get defensive and angry.
Yeah. Well, what's your reply? Leave aside my tone of voice. What is your substantive reply to what I've said?
I don't have a substantive. I think you're right.
I know you don't.
I just think the nature will take its course argument has to be qualified. You've now qualified it. I agree with you.
It wasn't evident that one thing I thought was bad about the Iraq War was the war part?
You were denying the effect, Bob. You were not only lamenting the war, you were denying the fact
well, obviously it's less authoritarian now, although it is still not an inspiring model. No one denies that.
What's not an inspiring model? The democracy they have in Iraq?
The one featuring ongoing carnage and low-level civil war, yeah.
Well, there was ongoing carnage and low-level civil war in Northern Ireland, too, and eventually it worked itself out.
It may, but you're claiming that this has already been the key inspiration for the Tunisians.
No, I'm just saying it was an inspiration. You don't want to admit
What's your
it's an
evidence
inspiration
that it's an
because
What is your evidence? What's your
positive
evidence?
ramifications of what Bush did.
What is your evidence that it's an inspiration for the Tunisian people?
I have no evidence. I'm just surmising it, and we have no particular evidence that Twitter was such a big damn effect either.
Well, how about the fact that the demonstrations in Egypt were organized on the internet? Does that tell you anything?
And Applebaum says that's not true. She says people just saw people going to the demo and they got out of their houses and went there.
Not only that, but I mean, not only was Facebook in fact and the internet generally in fact quite involved in the formation of all this, but the dynamic I've emphasized was also evident. What I've said, there's nothing inevitable. No regime has to let the internet into its country, as North Korea shows. But if you want prosperity, if you want your economy to flourish, you have to. And that's what we saw in Egypt. They shut down the internet for a few days, and although it still would have been politically desirable for them to keep it off, the economic costs were too high, and they had to turn it back on.
Did they turn it back on? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they turned it on after 3 days.
There may be evidence that Iraq was a positive
The Daily Caller, you should just come out of the closet,
Mickey. And I rely on people like Chris Hitchens to come up with the evidence that the Iraq War had a beneficial effect. My point is that you don't want to hear it, and you don't want to look for it, and you don't want to admit that it's a very lively possibility.
Mickey, when you come up with the evidence, that will be a test of whether I want to hear it. Okay? And if you're waiting for Chris Hitchens to mount a cogent and persuasive argument, I would recommend, finding a way to bide a considerable amount of time in the meanwhile.
Well, I think your hostility speaks volumes.
Yeah, I know. I feel very defensive about that too. But really, I mean, the Daily Caller, you are coming out of the closet here because you're not just saying this to provoke me. You have this gravitational pull toward right-wing ideas. I mean, you're not just throwing this out there. Now you're backing off from the argument. Now that
the idea of implanting democracy in the Middle East wasn't so bad. If we could have done it costlessly, as you think we can do in Egypt, it's worth doing. That's not a conservative idea. It's an idealistic idea, and it's one you share, I think.
But Mickey, to say if we could have done it costlessly is not what you said. You said, hey, wasn't the Iraq War, not so bad an idea after all?
No, I didn't say that. I said, aren't the people protesting in the streets in Egypt and Tunisia motivated not in part by looking at the example of what people now can do in Iraq? Didn't say it was worth it. I just said, didn't that have an effect? And you reacted apoplectically.
I have not seen any evidence that it had an effect. I have seen lots of evidence that the Internet had an effect, and that fact is all the more reason we didn't need to intervene in Iraq. But that reminds me, what is your new employer? What brand of conservatism does the Daily Caller represent?
I don't know. I mean, Tucker was always a fairly moderate conservative, and got into fights with other conservatives. And remember, he wrote that profile of George W. Bush that caused Bush a lot of damage because it had him making fun of somebody he was about to execute. Mm-hmm. It also sold me on George Bush in a way that turned out to be wrong, but made it seem like Bush was more moderate than he, in fact, governed as. But, the dynamics of the web, the grim dynamics of the web, if you're going for the search engine optimized play to the followers route, is that you have to appeal to the party faithful. And there are people who think that the Daily Caller has gone in that direction. I don't quite see...
Wait, I'm sorry. Gone in what direction? I lost you for a second.
Playing to the right-wing base in a way that makes it more conservative than it otherwise would be. It was obviously designed as sort of a Huffington Post of the right, but the question is, it pulled more to the right than it otherwise would be, in the way that cable TV news is pulled to the right. And I don't quite see it yet. I mean, he made fun of journalists, and but did that make him totally right wing? I think he's certainly a relatively open person, and I think the site is relatively open. Yeah, it's mainly of the right, but if you read it, they expose things about Michael Steele, and they do all sorts of things that are not lockstep party.
No, they showed a willingness to attack their own. But I was wondering kind of about foreign policy, because I know Tucker Carlson supported the Iraq War, but I thought I had heard him say some things since then suggesting that he had a little of the old-fashioned conservative skepticism of foreign intervention in him.
The answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't care, because I'm just going to say what I think.
That's the kind of guy you are. That's why they've hired you.
I'm also not a foreign policy guy, so I don't examine people's foreign policy before I go work with them. I probably should. I should know more about that than I do. But the right wing is going to splinter because half of them are going to oppose the war in Afghanistan. So
I hope
that will be very interesting to watch.
I hope, and the split on Egypt has been very interesting.
What did you think of Elliot Abrams sort of putting distance between himself and Israel, saying, "I'm for democracy in Egypt, and I don't understand why the Israelis aren't for it too"?
Well, I understand. Well, first of all, I understand why they're scared. Although I think they're mistaken to not ultimately recognize the inevitability of it and deal with it. But it's in general the interesting split within neoconservatism has forced some people to revise their more cynical theories about some neoconservatives. That they were just stooges for Israel. It's been a very interesting development and kind of heartening.
But if you were really cynical, wouldn't you say that it's a no cost image burnisher for neocons to say, yes, we're for democracy in Egypt, and if Israel doesn't like it, that's tough luck, because Israel isn't going to pay any attention to them anyway, and what's going to happen in Egypt is going to happen. In the meantime, they're going to look good.
That's really cynical, Mickey.
I'm a cynical.
They're making charges of dual loyalty, you realize.
I'm a cynical guy. That's not a charge of dual loyalty. It's that their singular loyalty is restoring their place in history.
I think there are genuine differences. I don't know. I mean, Elliot Abrams, I had always been willing to be, as cynical as necessary about in all regards. But I do think, within the movement, there is, within the neoconservative movement, there's a fair amount of difference. I mean, for example, the Washington Post editorial page is often called neoconservative. I think with genuinely good reason. But I think Fred Hyatt, who runs it, genuinely pro-democracy and not, not cynical in his motivation.
Well, I think a lot of these neocons are too. I was just saying that there is a possible cynical interpretation.
There could be, but that's been interesting. Now, we were going to talk about Reagan.
Well, do we really want to talk about Reagan? We've got an hour.
I'd say we have two ways we could go. We had talked about maybe sometimes when the stuff near the latter part of the show wasn't radically timely, kind of wait 48 hours, cut the dialogue in half, and post the second part on delay.
No,
I'm not sure if that's feasible.
I don't have that much to say about Reagan. It's just that I think, Kinsley wrote this two-part series, sort of trying to trash his legacy. None of the trashings of his legacy really seem very powerful to me. He did do, at least in the first term, he did a lot of good and necessary things, and he gets credit for that. And I just remember looking at it, listening to his speech in '64, rereading it many years later, his famous pro-Goldwater speech at the Republican '64 convention. There wasn't anything in it I disagreed with. It was all a necessary corrective to the insanity that liberalism had become. Was this? Did we really need a second term of that? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, my line on Reagan, of course, Mike Kinsley's argument is that, things he's credited with, cutting spending and so on, in raw terms, he didn't cut spending or federal employment. As a percentage of GDP, he did slightly, but Clinton made even more progress in those domains. My big beef is on foreign policy, the way he's not infrequently given credit for either single-handedly winning the Cold War or really, valuably hastening its end. And I just think it's the opposite of the truth. I mean, it may be true that turning up the pressure on the Soviets in places like Afghanistan slightly hastened the end of the Cold War. But when I went to the Soviet Union in like 90, 91, I'm telling you, that place the system was destined to collapse. They were so far behind us economically and technologically, you would not believe it. Instead of washing machines in the finest department stores, they had washboards. A, and B, we paid a huge price for the Afghanistan venture, which admittedly was actually started by Carter, but was vigorously sustained and amplified by Reagan. It was a cauldron that intensified radical Islam. If not for that, 9/11 would not have happened. I mean, it may be that there would have been some equally intense manifestation of radical Islam, but I thought
the whole problem was Israel, Bob, so Israel will still be there.
What?
I thought the main problem was Israel, and Israel would still be there if we hadn't
No, I think a lot of I don't think I've ever said the main problem is Israel. I think there are a lot of sources of fuel for radical Islam right now. They are Afghanistan occupation, Iraq war, Israel, and our support for these dictators, and probably a few other things. But the two things that the point is, Bin Laden was part of that U.S. supported and financed campaign in Afghanistan. And then he came back and saw the residue of the Persian Gulf War, saw our American troops in Saudi Arabia, in keeping with our alliance with dictators. And
wait, you supported that war? I was with you.
I actually didn't. I didn't support it at the time.
Yes, you said it was a part of the New World Order, and we were punishing trans-border aggression.
Well, I did later say it was a valid and legitimate.
You said it at the time. I remember.
No,
I didn't. Dick Cheney in the New Republic.
No, you're just wrong. I tell you what I wrote in the New Republic is that we shouldn't invade, but we should do some kind of punitive bombing, which I, in retrospect, don't think would have been all that effective. But as a matter of record, I did not support the war at the time. Now, I did later say, it's a textbook exercise of the use of the United Nations to validate and legitimize a war that was lawful because it was a punishment of transport aggression. That's all true. But it did have the bad consequence of leaving our troops in Saudi Arabia, which apparently sent bin Laden over the edge.
I just don't think just because we sent... it seems to be in the bigger picture. I remember meeting with some Czech activists and Reagan saying tear down this wall and all the evil empire. That was very important to them to have a clarion call of support from the West. And I don't take that away from Reagan. And I think that he was useful in that respect. In a way that, say, Nixon was not.
I'm just saying, if you ask me, would I accept a Cold War that lasted 2 years longer in exchange for Osama bin Laden not having been created, I'd take that deal. And that empire was teetering on the brink by virtue of the poverty of its own economic system, and the idea that, we needed to go in, support people in Central America who are raping and killing nuns, that was a valuable part of standing up to the Soviet Empire. It's just nonsense, like what, the dominoes were going to head north from Central America?
No, I agree with that. I mainly like Reagan because of domestic policy, but he certainly wasn't wrong in saying that communism was an evil empire that was destined to collapse. He just didn't draw all the necessary, implications.
No, I'm not sure he said it was destined to collapse. Did he say it was destined to collapse?
Oh, I'm sure he said that.
That's my line. It was destined to collapse.
No, I'm sure he said that.
Okay.
He started reforming welfare. He reformed the tax code. He broke the air traffic controllers. He at least tried to restrain the growth of government, and he at least held it stable. Clinton mainly restrained it by having a huge economic boom and contracting out the entire government to private consultants. Mm-hmm. So he at least tried and was sort of effective. He proved that it was very, very hard to cut the cost of government. Mm-hmm. There's virtue in having done that too, and all those things were good.
I guess we should say at some point, in case no one knows, or some people don't know, that the reason we're talking about this is because his 100th birthday or something?
Yeah, this past weekend was a whole bunch of festivities, and everybody was talking about it,
Yeah.
We're on the tail end of that.
The real tale, if this gets cut off and delayed for 2 days, the second part of the dialogue. There's something about the 59th minute of these dialogues. I always find myself screaming at someone, and today it was you, last time it was Ann Althouse. I don't know if it's that you save your provocations for then, or that's when the caffeine kicks in. I don't know.
I don't know either. I think in this case I provoked you. But that's what people like. They like seeing you angry.
Well, I'm not. There's some limit to the expense I'm willing to incur to make people happy.
But I don't
and
think
looking like a crazy person is slightly beyond that limit.
I think we may have proved that we live in a boring political time. This dialogue.
Except for the part where I was screaming like a crazy person.
Except for the part where you were screaming.
Yeah.
That was good.
Okay.
That was almost
I guess that's it.
That was sort of like watching Anderson Cooper getting beaten up.
Oh, yeah. That's a clip for the ages.
No, I wound up agreeing with you, so there.
Yeah. Well, that's because of the persuasive power of my whatever.
Must be that. I think it's because you pay my salary, so I have to... My blogging net salary.
Not anymore, now that we've fobbed you off on the Daily Caller. So we won't get into what that guy meant when he said, I'm Jerry Seinfeld and you're whoever.
Well, no, but obviously you would like that because it's better to be Jerry Seinfeld than Felix, so...
Yeah, I like it better than me being Felix and you being Oscar, yes.
Yeah, and I would rather be Oscar than Kramer, who I've always hated Kramer. He's an over-actor and not funny.
I have to admit, I don't quite see you as Kramer, and I don't quite see me as Seinfeld. But aside from that, it's a solid analogy.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll try to think of a better analogy, but I'm sticking with The Odd Couple.
I would too if I were you and I had duped the world into thinking that you were Oscar when in fact you're Felix.
Okay.
All right.
See you next time.
See ya.